read my notes?
No, go ahead.
I got my license from the State Bar in 1941, right after graduating from the university, at age 21. As my father did not believe in the need for a college education, I worked during the summers and got free room and board at the DK Fraternity House as house manager. I became an associate with the firm of Tom Hamilton and his father, but 6 months later, as a reserve officer, I was called into active duty in the Navy. I served for 4.5 years on active duty. After the war, we became Hamiltons and Denniston. I later went to Harvard University and recruited Harry Riddick to join us. I later made the mistake of investing in a home building business and left the law practice for about 6 months to a year. The business was unsuccessful and I had to close it down. When I returned to the law practice, I practiced on my own for a short time and then was invited by my friend and law school classmate Jack Galilee in what became Galilee, Denniston, and Eddington, until Jack suddenly died of a heart attack at age 55. I was recalled again during the Korean War and served as executive officer of a destroyer for two more years in both oceans. My practice has been primarily in federal income tax, real estate, probate, wills and trusts and estates. I have been of counsel to Brown Hudgens, which later became Wright Green. Since I've been of counsel to that firm since 1984. I incorporated Moby Memorial Garden Cemetery in 1954 and have been on the board ever since. It is a nonprofit cemetery. I became bar president in 1965. While being bar president, I appointed various committees. Most recently, under a later president, I served as chairman of the Public Relations Committee for a couple of years and supervised the work of a bunch of subcommittees. I have always enjoyed my association with so many fine lawyers. I've been fortunate in having the same legal secretary for 45 years, a lady by the name of Linda Spencer, who is also a good friend of my dear wife, who recently died. That's my story.
Sounds good, Rob.
I'm sure there's more to it, though. Can you tell us about any of the attorneys?
What's that?
Can you tell us about any of the attorneys you practiced with outside of your firm, or judges that you appeared before during your practice, before you were of counsel?
What are the lawyers?
Any that are notable, any that you recall working with?
Oh, well, Lord, there's so many. I couldn't begin to remember them.
Okay. What about judges?
Huh?
What about judges? Any ones that you particularly
yeah,
liked
well,
or disliked?
Yeah, I was very fond of Judge Thomas.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, he was a great man, and he was kind of a mentor to a lot of lawyers. He's the principal one that I highlighted in my thinking.
Did you do a lot of work in federal court?
I did in my early practice, we did a good bit of admiralty work when I was with the Hamilton firm. And so I did that, and I did a great deal of bankruptcy work for a long time before, quite a number of bankruptcy judges.
Okay.
I did mainly Chapter 11 reorganizations. Reorganized a good many companies, got them back on their feet, lost a couple that finally went straight bankruptcy. But it was a lot of fun and good practice. That's kind of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any family members or descendants that are members of the bar?
Yeah, my son Michael Denniston is one of the senior partners in a law firm in Birmingham. Bradley A. Rand, Booth and Cummings.
Okay.
And he's primarily in copyright, trademark, and intellectual properties. Has to travel to a number of different cities all over the United States in his practice, and he's a member of a number of international committees. He's a very capable young lawyer. That's about it.
Well, tell me about some of your ideas on the evolution of the law during your practice. How it's changed, what you've seen in terms of
Well, it's
evolution.
become, the bar has become so large that it's become where you don't know many of the lawyers personally.
Sure.
That's the biggest difference that I have seen. You've got a close circle of close lawyer friends, but the rest of it is so enormous that you really don't have much contact with them. I've attended bar associations throughout my career until the last 2 or 3 years, meeting regularly. And I've attended a number of state bar conventions and enjoyed them immensely. Had to speak at a couple of them on subjects that I was familiar with. It's a great profession and I've enjoyed it.
Robert, can you recall how many members of the bar there were when you joined the Mobile Bar Association? I was number 400.
I think we had about 150. Maybe, when I started, I think they were 80 to 100.
You could get them all in one photograph, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The bar used to do photographs.
Yeah.
And then they always had one
Of course,
photograph to get everybody in.
you knew them all.
Right.
Now we have 500?
1,200.
1,200, okay.
Well, there's 1,300, over 1,300 in Mobile County,
Okay.
but there's about 1,200 of those are members of the bar.
Was a U.S. attorney and a good one. And Mr. Percy was a Democrat, and he got throat cancer, and he got a little sick. And the Republicans, I was a Republican in those days, met, and they chose the son of a federal judge up in the north of this state named Kennemer, had a son named Ralph. And he came down here and he was selected by the Republican Executive Committee and to succeed Percy Fountain. Now, of course, U.S. attorneys' jobs and assistant U.S. attorney jobs in those days were chosen in that way. If the Democrat president was president, his party selected them as the Republican. But those people were gentlemen, and they would not. Ralph wouldn't take the job and go in the office as long as Mr. Percy was battling throat cancer. And he battled hard against it. I remember I used to take papers out to his home back. And when he finally passed away, Ralph came in. And I found out soon that although Ralph was different from Percy, he was a fine man and an honest man. Those two people never knowingly did anything that was wrong. Percy Fountain. Ralph was the same way. Now it's hard for me to find these advertising lawyers doing anything right. And I tell you, our profession is in grave danger. And I wish we could have a meeting of the bar and change it and say, no more solicitation, no more advertising. You're a profession, not a business. And tell the truth, not lies.
Tell us about some of your mentors when you got into private practice after you left the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Well, there were some folks around that I got to know, and most of the lawyers then in Mobile, you didn't have to worry about anything. If you found out they were a lawyer, they would be all right, okay. Yeah.
Bob, let me ask, I like to
Bob will tell you, you didn't have to worry when a lawyer told you something in a professional conversation over a legal matter. You could rely on the fact that he believed it was true.
Bob, in 1941, Bob started practicing in 1941. Tell us what happened when World War II came along. How did it affect the Bar Association? Can you give us some insight into the years as the war progressed and what happened when the war came?
Well, of course, a number of the lawyers were called into the service, and quite a large number were on active duty. Some of them were on active duty before I came in, like Galilee and some of those others. They had already been on Will G. Caffey. They'd been on active duty because they had been in the reserve before the war. I was not in the reserve before the war. I was too young.
Will Caffey was, and Bill Cowan were the two assistant U.S. attorneys. By the way, there were only two assistant United States attorneys at that time.
Yeah.
And Keenan Blackmore and I were the two Republicans that were picked to sit. Now the U.S. Attorney's Office has what, 25?
25 or 30.
Yeah.
Did cases get affected and postponed because of the war? The attorneys being called to active duty?
A number of them, some of my cases were postponed. Yeah.
All right, now what happened to you doing? Did you stay practicing during the war? Were you here in Mobile practicing?
No.
You went to the service?
I was in the service from 41 until 45.
You want to tell us something about that?
Huh?
Tell us about your service during that period of time.
Oh.
Were you in legal division of the army, or were you?
I was an ensign. I went to substation school. I was sent to substation school immediately after I was called active duty. Then I was the skipper of a 110-foot wooden substation that was first in the Atlantic and then went through the Panama Canal, was based in San Diego. And then I was sent to what they call a destroyer escort, which is a small destroyer, as a young officer in charge of the deck force. And we went out to the Pacific. We went to the coast of Japan, and we operated off of the coast of Japan while the fight was still going on there. And then I was put on a helicopter and was sent to another destroyer escort down in the Philippines. And then we operated for a long time in the Philippines area until the war ended. Then during the Korean War, when I became the executive officer of a destroyer, we operated in the Atlantic for about a year, going all the way up to Maine and operating all and down the coast, escorting other ships and protecting the area which probably didn't need.
What was your rank at that time, Bob?
What's that?
What rank? What did you hold?
I was a lieutenant commander during the Korean War, and then we were sent back out into the Pacific, and we operated off of North Korea. We had some battles with some of the North Korea. We went into the harbors in North Korea to protect minesweepers who were keeping mines from being drifted out by the North Koreans into the Sea of Japan. And while we were operating out in that area, we had to go through several typhoons, which was a dreadful experience. And after a couple of those typhoons, then we were sent up to the northern coast of Japan shortly after the war ended there. And while we were escorting carriers, my ship made the mistake of hitting a floating North Korean mine. It blew about a 20 or 30 foot long hole on the side of our ship. Killed a bunch of men. And so we had, it knocked out what they call one fire room and one engine room, so we had to operate with one engine room and fire room. And by that time, our tour of duty was over, because we were kind of a limping ship. So they sent us back to the United States with another destroyer that was in good shape, and would send us the rest of the way around the world, back through the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, we had left Norfolk when we started the Korean venture. When we finally got back to Norfolk. By that time, my second tour of duty or third tour of duty was up, so I was able to leave the ship in Norfolk and come home, and for the third time started practicing law again. And now I'm just closing out my last 2 law cases, and I'm retiring from the practice of law.
Well, he went into the
service, meantime,
got out the year I got in.
In the meantime, I'm writing a book about my life in Korea, in the law and in the Navy, and in a few weeks it will be finished.
How old are you now, Bob?
I'm almost 94.
All right.
I'll be 94 in June.
All right, you're just now winding up your practice, huh?
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I want to ask Tommy a couple of questions here about juries. You did a lot of jury work in trials, did you not, starting from the time you practiced law? Let's talk about the composition of juries in the state and the federal courts back then. Did you have integrated juries? Did you have women on the juries? Tell us about the state courts, the juries there.
No women for a long time.
All right.
The federal or state court.
Did you have an integrated jury?
We had some blacks.
Are we talking about federal court or state court?
We got the blacks and the women in the federal system before in the state system.
Right. But in 52...
Alabama was a little backward in that regard.
Okay, in 1952, when you started practicing law, the juries in the state court was all white men, were they not?
Mostly. In state court, yes. In federal court, where I started, you see, as a young man. Remember, see, in 1944, I was 17. I went in the Navy, and I served for 27 months, including over in the Pacific. I saw some of those mines you were talking about. I was on a troop transport. I was on a patrol craft once. But I got out just as quick as I could. I went in, patriotic. 1944, we didn't seem to be moving that war, and I was patriotic. Most young people then were patriotic, which they are today, I don't think. But at any rate, when I went in the Navy, it was all kind of patriotism, but there was a lot of things that occurred that changed me. And when I got out in 1947, I was thinking in different terms, and even went to Emory University to study theology. My short story on why I'm not a Methodist preacher is I went to Emory, And the second day I was there, as I walked around the campus, it was the second floor of the balcony and the porch in one of the buildings. And I was going by the theology building there, and I nearly got hit by someone spitting tobacco out of the place. And I got to thinking, this place I'm going to school to be a Methodist preacher's got people spit tobacco, and I'd seen some beer cans around and things. And I just switched all the way over and left Emory and came over to Alabama to study pre-law and then law. I decided that law was a safer job than theology. It was amazing to me, and it still is to this day, that the students could openly chew tobacco in theology school. I never have forgotten that, but I learned to dislike things that I had accepted in the past, and I found that pre-law students were a lot better than pre-theology students. And I decided I would try to be a lawyer. But since then, when I started, I liked it a lot. I ran into some wonderful people, both in law school and after.
But juries for a long while in the 50s were predominantly white men, and usually well-educated,
Yeah.
and had assets.
You couldn't get on a
There were very few working men on a jury.
The jury system was not like it is now. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure that the jury system is better than a system of ethical, well-trained lawyers sitting as judges. I would probably, if I had a case I thought I should win, I would prefer some educated, ethical lawyers as judges.
Okay, but no, I'm talking about.
You throw a jury at you.
Yeah, but I'm talking about old times. The juries in both the federal and state courts were basically, in fact, all of them were solid white men. Women were not allowed to serve on juries.
White men.
And women were not allowed to serve on a jury.
No women.
That's right.
And
that existed for a good part of the 1950s, did it not?
Well, I didn't particularly, frankly, I didn't enjoy jury law practice at first. Because you can't depend on a jury doing what's right, unless it's the right kind of jury. And of course, I think it was overdue for women to be on juries. I never could understand why women didn't have the same rights as men. And I still don't think they should have the same rights and duties. After all, every one of them was my mother. And I think that women are just as capable, if not more capable, than men.
Okay, the law back in the 50s also, a woman could not sign a deed to her own property without being taken in the room next door to be sure her husband wasn't forcing her to do it. Isn't that correct?
Put it this way, that
Bob probably knows more about that than you do. Isn't that correct, Bob?
That's right.
two of the best
Tell
lawyers
let him tell us about a woman trying to sell her own real estate. Tell us how it worked, Bob. A woman wants to sell. Let's say the home particularly. I think there was a statute dealing with the home that if she was part owner of the home, or if the husband was selling the home and he was sole owner, and the wife had to sign the deed along with him, she had to be taken in another room. Did she not?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. To make an independent decision.
Right.
That's right.
So her husband couldn't influence her with
That's
the
right.
purpose.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Now, another thing that existed back in the old days, the Bar Association had a minimum fee
Yeah.
schedule, did it not?
That's right.
And you were expected to abide by
Long
it.
time. A long time, yeah.
Do you remember that? It was a
I
published.
still got a copy of it.
Okay, it was a published fee schedule, and all lawyers were given a copy of it, and
That's right.
you could be disciplined if you didn't
Right.
if you tried to undercut the minimum
Not
fee
less than
schedule.
the minimum fee.
You remember that, Tommy?
Yeah. Two of the best lawyers I saw, and we find them on the old lawyer boys were Joyce Van Allen and Rosa
Yeah,
Gilhart.
very capable women,
Both of them were court reporters.
yeah.
So
Rosa
they could make
Gilhart.
a living, a woman could make a living practicing law in those days.
They both went on to be president of the bar too.
That's right, they were very, very good lawyers too. And some of our lawyers today, I've seen them in court. You can rely on the lady lawyers a lot more than you can some of the men lawyers nowadays. Now, I hate to say these kind of things because as you can see, at my age of 86, I'm not too proud of some of the things my profession engages in. And I see it, and see it on TV. They even brag about it. They brag about how much money they got in a lawsuit. You're not supposed to do that. Not in the way I think. I was trained in law school, you do not solicit business. You don't ask for business, you don't advertise.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, slowly but surely, that disintegrated. And
Tom,
that,
do you have a case, a particular case that comes to your mind that was of interest or colorful or something where you really did a bang-up job?
well, that's another thing you have to remember. A lawyer should not be judged on whether he won or lost.
I didn't say
Well,
whether you won or lost.
That's Mary Ann said at Mercy where I graduated from '44. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. So lawyers win or lose cases, that doesn't mean they're not good lawyers.
No, the question was, did you have a particularly colorful case of sort that still sticks in your mind that was unusual, maybe it could be of interest to members of the bar?
Well, I have to think there's been a lot of them. I remember, that's it, that man, that's Hockland. I was trying a case in his court. It was a murder case, and the state was trying to get the defendant electrocuted, or whatever they did, and punish people. The case was going on, and I had to work into the night, and I had gotten some threats, and a fellow got up on top of the building across from the old courthouse. The police found him with a rifle. He was going to try to kill me because I was defending this terrible man for 4 years. I found him, and the jury was out. And the day before, they had the police caught the fellow with a gun trying to shoot me, and they put me in a motel. I didn't get to go home that night. And the judge was trying it day and night. Hocklander was trying to get rid of the case. So he was working long hours, and I appreciated it too. Because the fellow I was appointed to represent him, but I was a lawyer, and I was trying my best to salvage what was left of his soul. And the jury was out, and I came in. I had to go late while they were eating. I went across the street, and I came back. And the jury came back, and they had to assess the penalty. And Coleman said, find the defendant guilty and sentence him to life. So that I had done the only thing I could do. I could save his bastard's life. And that's what he was. He wasn't a very nice man, of course. And he committed a terrible crime.
Bob, was any case particular, one that seems to be very unusual that sticks in your mind?
Not at the moment.
The reason I said that is because when I heard that word light, I mentioned this, but I pray a lot. And I thought, thank God for him saving his life. Later on, by the way, that man who I defended, I saw him up in the courthouse on a jury.
Can I
Tommy
mention one other
Sting.
thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
He was charged with capital murder and he got life instead of the electric chair and eventually got parole. And came back with his practice. Whatever he's doing in the courthouse, he was a juror, I think.
Oh, yeah. Another thing that I've enjoyed, I have been able to do quite a bit of pro bono work for people, indigents, and I've enjoyed doing a good bit of that and trying to help quite a number of people that way. Been appointed through the Bar Association pro bono program.
Right, been referred to you by the Bar Association.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
I've
I've enjoyed
all
that.
the business I got as a lawyer was when a judge appointed me. I don't take appointments and file a thing for money. I've never been paid.
Well, the procedure back in the 50s, when you started practicing, I did was, I think Judge Eddington would handle most of the criminal cases back then, but there was no setup for defending
No, they didn't pay it.
criminal defendants other than the judge would pick young lawyers. He would just pick young lawyers and assign them to defend a
Nowadays,
particular
there's a
individual.
bunch of lawyers living off of appointments. Did you know that?
Well, there was no procedure, but I guess what the question we're asking you, there was no procedure for defending defendants charged with crimes back in the 50s, and when the federal courts came along and ruled they were entitled to counsel, the judge presiding over the criminal trials would simply pick some young lawyers who'd been out of law school maybe 2, 3, 4 years and assign them, one or two of them, to represent a particular defendant.
They pick a lawyer, not necessarily a young lawyer.
Okay. They would pick a lawyer and assign him.
Well, most of the judges, and we had some great judges, wanted to find a lawyer that could do something, that was capable. And there weren't too many criminal lawyers around. Mr. Harry was there, and Sullivan was around, and a few others was, the job of going to court and persuading juries to save the lives of people who've done something horrible, that's not easy. And it's something that it takes a great deal of skill to even accomplish.
Right.
Can I ask y'all a question?
Yes.
Who were the judges that were on the bench when y'all began your practice in the first years?
Judge Grayson, and I forget the name of the other one.
Bates, Cecil Bates.
No, it was
He came on later.
before Bates.
Tuart?
Huh?
Tuart?
Well, Tuart was the juvenile judge.
He was
Yeah,
whole court.
he was in in what's would be known as General Sessions Court.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget the name of the other senior judge. Can't remember. He was about Grayson's age. Both of them were fine men. I practiced before.
But Judge Eddington, you remember Judge Eddington? I think he was down there, was he?
Judge Eddington was mostly on criminal.
Eddington.
Yeah, he concentrated on the criminal docket.
Yeah. I can't remember the other judge. He was a gray-headed, old. Can't remember his name.
Judge Eddington was a wonderful man.
Yeah.
He really was.
Yeah, he was.
Most of the judges then were very reputable people and respectful.
They sure were.
And you expected them to do what was right, and they expected you to do that also as a lawyer. There's things that lawyers do every day today that have been disbarred of 30, 40 years. They do it all the time.
One of the narrations that I gave you both, one of the contributors was Judge Dan Thomas, and he talked a lot about the impact of the institution of the rules of procedure on the practice of law and the changes in discovery. How did it affect your practice?
Well, I just say consider, but I don't remember particularly. Yeah.
It changed it considerably?
Oh, yeah, and how?
Well, Judge Thomas had just taken the bench when I got out of law school. I didn't get out of law school until that time because I spent 27 months in the Navy, the tail end of the Second War. And have you ever been on duty as an officer and looked down and seen a mine bumping up and down?
Yeah, absolutely.
One day I looked down and there was a mine right by the side of our 26,000-ton ship floating along, and I knew when it got back to the propellers, it'd probably suck it in. I said, "Oh my God, we're dead now." Yeah. I went in and told our captain, by the way, was an alcoholic, and he wouldn't let him. Told chief officer that, and he said, "Well, what can we?" I said, "What can we do?" He said, "Do what I think you've already done to me. Pray."
Pray. Yeah.
Because if that mine, if we're not awfully lucky, it's going to get our propeller in just a few minutes. It was a 26,000-ton ship that the United States had inherited by seizing it in the Panama Canal. It was an Italian luxury line.
Converted.
They stole this ship from Italy because they were the enemy.
Yeah.
One of the enemies said Italy's on the other side.
Yeah.
How long were you in the service, Tom?
27 months.
You know, tell us a
And
little,
I
give us
wanted-
sort of a rundown like Bob
I just wanted to
did.
get out. I don't like to talk.
Give us a little rundown of you.
Because in the South, Republicans were few and far between back in those days. Now I'm not too sure. I'm certainly not a Republican like some of the Republicans, I'll put it that way. Nixon just about changed me completely in my Republican. As far as the service is concerned, I don't have any things that would help anybody here talking about it today. War.
But you were in the Navy the whole time?
Yeah, I was an enlisted man in the Navy. War is one of the reasons why we're not succeeding as people. The world is not going to keep on surviving because there are weapons now that will destroy the whole country and the whole world.
Did you say you were 17 when you went into the Navy?
Just barely.
Just barely 17.
I was
my
17 in April and I graduated from Murphy in June. Of course, you had to volunteer. Everybody then wanted to get in and help our country when that war. I'll tell you, patriotism made this a great country at that time.
Was that a real culture
1940s.
shock?
Mhm.
Was that a real culture shock for you coming from Mobile, Alabama onto a ship?
Well,
What year?
I got the way I was called rebel and stuff like that. I was tall and skinny, and I didn't have an awful lot of friends when I was an enlisted man in the Navy. It was good. I enjoyed some part of it, but I was glad to get home. Let me tell you my favorite funny story. When I got off of got to be sent to be discharged, I was sent from Vallejo, California to New Orleans Lake Pontchartrain Naval Station, and I came back on a troop drawing, and I had 2 sea bags full of things. I got some cheap cigarettes. My father smoked what do you call them? Chesterfield. So I got him some Chesterfields, and the overseas, they sent cigarettes over there. I used to see them come in and wax things. I didn't care because I didn't smoke, but there were a bunch of them, and he smoked, and my 2 older brothers smoked. My mother didn't smoke. And I brought that in one sea bag and my Navy stuff, uniforms and stuff in another. when they discharged me at Lake Pontchartrain and over there across the way from New Orleans, I grabbed those two sea bags and got into a bus, and it dumped me right near the something that I'd never seen before in my life, the French Quarter of New Orleans. Of course, I was a 19-year-old boy in a well-made, tailor-made Navy suit my daddy bought me, and I put those things in a place in the bus station and wandered into the French Quarter. And I had some adventures. I can't talk about some of them here. A 19-year-old in the French Quarter of New Orleans in 1947. That was an interesting adventure. I'd never been to New Orleans. In fact, I had a vague recollection of something called the French Quarter, but there was some. I went into a restaurant, and a lady that worked in a place across the street. She looked like a movie actress or something, but she was a stripper in one of those places, and she came in there and started paying for my food and ordered me a cold beer, and I didn't drink, but I drank a little beer with it. New Orleans, I stayed there a couple of days, and I never have forgotten that. I never did get back over there for a long time. Later on, many years later, my wife and I had an apartment in the French Quarter on Charters. That's not part of being a lawyer.
What were you doing there? You lived there for a while?
Well, I had an apartment over there across from the Richelieu. I used to get a lot of cases in federal court after I left as an assistant U.S. attorney. And I was arguing, by the way, I was arguing a case in the federal court, and the federal court was across the street from a restaurant. What's the name of that place? I can't think of it. It's been so long since I've been back to New Orleans.
You talking about the appellate court, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals?
Yeah, old Fifth Circuit. It's on,
Camp.
no, it's a street that runs,
Boydress.
by the way, this is something y'all may not know about. Last October, I left my office over near the courthouse, Lawrence Street. My office is in the same building with Virginia Hayes. She offered me that place when landlady at the other office I had was selling a building. I got into my car to go have a malted milk. I like to go to George's Candy Shop. I'm different from most people. I'm not going to a bar. I'm going to get a malted milk. So I was on my way over there, and I got to Government Street, crossing to go across Government so I could get over and go to George's Candy Shop for my malted milk. It was September the 9th, October the 9th, one of those days. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When I got to Government Street on Franklin, I looked that way and right way, and no cars, this thing coming. Started crossing. Right across the street there is the Archbishop's place where he lives. And I happen to know Lipscomb is a wonderful man, he's a friend of mine, but the new one is a younger fellow. But anyway, as I went across the street in this car that my wife had found, I was going around slow, and I didn't think anything was going to look place up. Bam! I frankly thought I was dead. A black man, it turned out later, a black man on a motorcycle ran right into my car about 2 or 3 inches behind where the front seat was, and caved in the back end of the car and turned it around and had it headed back toward the west. When I woke up, I had no idea. Frankly, I was wondering whether I was alive, and I was waking up and I had a mad desire to get out of this car I was in. And I couldn't open the inside. And I saw someone in black by the door, opening the door on the outside. And it turned out to be the Archbishop, the president, Rodel, I think he did. And he was trying to get the door open from the outside, and he finally got it open. And I looked up, and there's people all over the street. There was a mob, and there wasn't anybody out there when I was crossing the street. So I must have been out for about 30, 40 minutes at least.
Gee whiz.
The car was totaled that I was in. And I looked over there, and the black man that hit me was driving a motorcycle. And there was a pile of metal trash around at one point it had been a motorcycle, but he had hit me so hard it had destroyed the motorcycle. And he was lying there dead. And Archbishop opened the door to let me out. This is something I'll remember a long time. The thought that I never had an adventure like that in the service. I'm sure it would have been like a shell hitting the side of the ship, you know, because it, boom. That was just last part of October. And as a result of that, I'm going to a neurologist. My doctor sent me to, and they've x-rayed and everything. I don't have any brain damage, but I'll tell you, I'm not the same as I used to be. I have trouble remembering things. I'm glad I got files and cases and stuff, because a lot of the work I was doing, I've forgotten. I remember the names sometimes, and when I open the file, it comes back. My brain isn't destroyed, but it was damaged.
Let me, we're gonna try to wind up here. Let me ask you one final question for each of you. The number of years each of you have been practicing law, and any advice you would give to a young lawyer starting today. And then we're gonna close this out.
Well, I think if I were a young lawyer today, I would be working to restore this profession that we're in. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a lot of lawyers, I guess, but there never were, in the days we started, a lot of lawyers, because it was difficult to become a lawyer. You had to work and study and pass hard tests and go through law school and get out and do the things it takes to be a good lawyer, so there weren't a lot of them. And most all of them, I don't remember any of them that I didn't trust. There were some that I could laugh at, like Mr. Sullivan sometimes, and Mr. Harry even. Mr. Harry was the only one that some people somewhat questioned his ethics, you know. But that was something that it's all about criminal lawyers. Criminal lawyers were thought, well, man, you know, they represent bad people. So criminal lawyers weren't looked up to.
Bob?
That's not the way it should be. If I had it to be, I wish we could get back to the way lawyers used to be. A profession of honest, ethical, dedicated people that are trying to help other people. And I drifted into criminal law. I never didn't want to be a criminal lawyer. I didn't, you know, I had the same feeling other people had about criminals and stuff. But I forgot that everyone is presumed to be innocent.
Bob, give us any comments that you might suggest to a new lawyer.
I would think in law school to emphasize, if it's possible, more than they have in the past, the matter of ethics.
Right.
Just to try to help steer guys and women in the right direction. That's about the only thing I can think of.
Well, I'd like to, on behalf of the Archives and History Committee of the Bar Association, I'd like to thank Robert Denniston and Thomas Hayes for appearing with us today. I'd like to thank Donna Henderson for serving as court reporter to transcribe this testimony. And I'd like to thank our other committee members for participating in this program, and particularly Dottie for leading off the interrogation of our witnesses here. We appreciate your coming, and we appreciate your sharing the information with us that we propose to share with the Bar Association.
And I thank Mr. Denniston, this is your 73rd year to practice law, and Tom, your 52nd?
Let's see.
No, 62nd. 62nd.
I'll be 87 Monday, the next
62. He's been practicing law 62 years.
62 years, all right. Good for you.
Well, it's a wonderful profession, and I've met a lot of wonderful people. But
I
I don't know what about a third of them. And the ones that I'm most impressed with by now, the young lady lawyers. They work hard and they seem to be dedicated. They don't fib.
Fine addition to the profession.
Amen.
Gentlemen, y'all are very special. We thank you.